On July 1st, 1776, the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia fell one vote short of a unanimous decision to declare the independence of the American colonies from the Empire of Great Britain. The motion to split from Great Britain was contingent on winning the vote of the tiny coastal colony of Delaware, just to the south. If the state's delegates voted in the affirmative, then the Congress would be able to formally adopt the Declaration of Independence and assert itself as an independent nation. As a vote for independence was tantamount to treason in the eyes of the British, any delegate backing the motion placed himself at considerable risk. Welcome to this episode of History Nuggets. Today's episode takes us to early July of 1776 in the American colony of Delaware, as we follow the path of a lonely midnight rider persisting through a brutal thunderstorm in The Persistence of Caesar Rodney. In order for Delaware to approve the measure, 2 of its 3 delegates needed to appear in person in Philadelphia to vote for independence. Otherwise, the state would be considered deadlocked and the drive for an independent union of colonial states would fail. 2 of the Delaware delegates split, with New London lawyer Thomas McKean voting for independence, while George Reed of Newcastle favored reconciliation with the British and voted against. Delaware's 3rd delegate, former Kent County Sheriff and current Associate Justice Caesar Rodney, would cast the deciding opinion in the vote scheduled for July 2, 1776. Rodney's capacity as Brigadier General in the Continental Army had called him to the town of Lewis, in southern Delaware, in order to quell a pro-British uprising in late June. By the 1st of July, he had returned to his home near Dover, still quite distant from Philadelphia's Independence Hall, where the meeting of delegates was scheduled to take place. McKean realized the implications of the deadlocked vote and dispatched a rider on a fleet-footed horse to carry a message with all haste, imploring Rodney to return to Philadelphia at once. Caesar Rodney was, in the words of John Adams,
tall, thin, and slender as a reed, pale. His face is not bigger than a large apple, yet there is sense and fire, spirit, wit, and humor in his countenance.
Despite being only 47 years of age, he suffered from persistent poor health, including a serious case of asthma. In addition, a particularly visible form of cancer, which had begun as a blemish on his nose, had grown until it had covered the entire left hemisphere of his head. In order to hide these scars, he wore a green silk kerchief over his nose and mouth whenever he appeared in public. Despite his infirmities, Rodney wasted no time upon receiving McKean's message on the evening of July 1st. He immediately mounted a horse and left his Dover home on the road to Philadelphia and right into the heart of a raging thunderstorm. The journey traversed about half of the length of the state of Delaware and then some, and Rodney persisted along the roughly 80-mile course throughout the night. The downpour descended in torrents and punished the lone, frail rider, soaking him to the bone despite being clad in a thick greatcoat, as well as heavy boots and a hat. With the moon concealed behind a blanket of clouds, lanterns rare, and torches out of the question, Rodney was forced to rely on his ability to see in near darkness to guide him along, only to have the sky occasionally pierced by a blinding lance of flashing lightning. His horse, who was at least equally drenched, continued to plod along over muddy roads, slick paving stones, and rickety bridges spanning rain-swollen creeks. As morning broke, the clouds cleared, allowing Rodney some respite from the deluge. However, as the sun rose high in the sky, the temperature skyrocketed, so the second half of his journey meant suffering instead through scorching mid-Atlantic heat. Caesar Rodney arrived at Independence Hall in time for the vote, just as the debates were finishing, with barely minutes to spare before the deadline. His ally, Thomas McKean, greeted him heartily upon his arrival, before rushing him indoors to the assembly hall. As the rest of the assembled scholars gathered in their light cotton waistcoats and embroidered finery, Rodney, hunched and weather-worn, stomped into the room, fresh off his horse and still clad in his riding habit. Rodney strode into the chamber, the clomp of his heavy boots accompanied by the jingling of his spurs. A cloud of dust, shaking off his overcoat with every step, surrounded his wraith-like form, as his face remained concealed behind the omnipresent green veil. Eyes from across the room were drawn to him as he settled among his colleagues before casting his vote in favor of independence. The motion passed, and after debating specific wording for 2 days, the Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence. The United States of America therefore came into being on July the 4th, 1776. In a letter to his brother Thomas, Caesar Rodney later downplayed the challenge of his ride, saying only that he was detained by thunder and rain, but arrived in time to vote. He later served as the president, that is, governor, of Delaware from 1778 until 1781, at which time he was forced to resign due to his failing health. He died not long after, childless and unmarried, a victim of the cancer which had plagued him for so many years. No contemporary portraits exist of Caesar Rodney, and he is one of the few members of the Continental Congress who do not appear in John Trumbul's famous image of the presentation of the Declaration of Independence. He was, however, memorialized by a dramatic statue in Rodney Square in Wilmington from 1923 until 2020, when it was removed to storage over concerns for vandalism. It, like his image on the back of the Delaware State Quarter, depicts him during his famous overland horse ride, which secured the independence not only of his home state, but of the whole of the United States. Thank you kindly for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories just like this one in the future. Have a beautiful day, and we wish you all peace and knowledge.